Wyoming Territory, autumn of 1869. The wind howled like a hungry thing over the open plains, dragging dust and ice across the broken earth. Beneath a dead cottonwood, a pinewood coffin rested in the frozen dirt, half covered, as though even the ground itself refused to take what remained of Henry Whitmore. Clara stood alone beside it, her black shawl snapping behind her like a flag on a sinking ship. Her boots were thin. Her hands, red and raw, clutched the small leather-bound Bible her father had insisted she carry. Her face, pale and drawn, betrayed none of the storm inside her. Not grief. Not rage. Only the terrible stillness that settles over the soul after too much has been taken too fast. Behind her, the wagon train stirred with quiet discomfort. No one offered a word. No one stepped forward. Then came the voice. "You'll marry, Miss Whitmore," said Captain Lyle Hart, his broad frame cloaked in dust and authority. "Or you'll stay behind. Ain't no room for a lone woman on this trail. You know that." Clara didn't turn. Her fingers tightened on the Bible. "He just died," she whispered. "Aye. And the wolves won't wait on your mourning." A murmur rippled through the circle of settlers, soft, but edged in fear. This land did not coddle grief. It carved it into bone. Hart gave a grim nod. "There's a man will take you. If you agree." The murmurs fell silent. Every eye shifted eastward, toward the distant ridge, where a lone figure stood against the sky, beside a dark horse the size of a barn door. He moved down the slope with heavy, measured steps, his long coat trailing behind like a specter. His beard was thick, streaked with gray and soot. His hat shadowed deep-set eyes that had seen too many winters and buried too many men. His name was Emmett Crane. Whispers followed him like ghosts. That he'd once tamed a silver wolf with his bare hands. That he'd lived alone in the Bitterroot for 7 years without a word to another soul. That he'd buried a wife and a child, and maybe more. He stopped 5 paces from Clara. No greeting. No sympathy. Only a voice like gravel sliding down a canyon wall. "I got 2 hands and a fire. You ride with me. I don't ask questions. I don't want none." Clara blinked slowly. She felt the world narrowing, collapsing into this moment. Her throat burned with unshed screams. Emmett looked her in the eye. "You say no, I keep walking." And that would be the end of her. No wagon master would let her continue without protection. Not with winter clawing at the trail and bandits prowling the woods. So she said, "I'll ride." The wedding was done by dusk. No lace, no music. Just Captain Hart reading scripture and the sound of horses shifting restlessly behind him. Emmett didn't touch her hand. He didn't even look at her. He said "I do" like it was a chore. That night, Emmett pitched his canvas lean-to beside his wagon, laid out a spare bedroll, and gestured at it. "You sleep there," he muttered. "I take the wagon bed." Clara didn't argue. She sat in silence, staring into the fire. Her ring, it wasn't gold. Just a twisted loop of rawhide he'd cut from his saddle strap. She hated the feel of it. The trail was cruel. Snow fell early. One morning, Clara's fingers turned blue. The wind flayed her cheeks, and her feet went numb inside worn-out boots. She tried to smile at the other women along the train, but they looked away, unsure what to make of the girl married to a giant who said less in a week than most men did in an hour. Emmett never touched her. He spoke only when needed. But he watched. When a wagon wheel splintered and the oxen bucked, he was already there, shoulder under the axle. When her cough worsened, she woke to find a hot stone wrapped in wool beside her hands. He was not cruel. He was not kind. He was elemental. Like the wind. Like the wolves. And Clara hated him for it. Each night she read from her Bible, not for comfort, but to remember the cadence of her father's voice. Then, beneath the pages, she kept another relic, Samuel's letters. Samuel Royce had been a Union soldier with a wound in his belly and a gentle laugh. She'd nursed him back to health in Missouri before the war ended. He'd promised to write. Promised to wait. The letters stopped 6 months ago. Still, she carried them. Folded and worn. Words like lifelines. "I will see you again, Clara. In Oregon. Wait for me." But Oregon was 1,000 frozen miles away. And Emmett Crane didn't write letters. One afternoon, her foot slipped on a snowy slope and she tumbled hard, landing with a thud beside the wagon. The breath ripped from her lungs. She lay still, stunned. The others rode on. Emmett doubled back. He lifted her like she weighed nothing, cradled her close, and set her on the wagon bench. No words. That night, as she shivered near the fire, he sat opposite her, slowly pulling off his gloves. His hands were gnarled, scarred. One finger twisted sideways from an old break. Without asking, he took her foot into his lap and wrapped it in fur. She stared at him, jaw clenched. "You don't have to help me," she said. He met her gaze. "You're mine, now." A pause. Then he added, "Ain't meant like that. Means you're under my name. That's all." She wanted to scream. To ask why he didn't say more. Why he didn't let her cry or speak or be anything beyond useful. But Emmett Crane wasn't a man of questions. He was a man of miles. Days passed. The wolves followed. At night, their cries rang out like lamentations from the woods. The wagon train moved faster. Clara stopped reading the Bible. She reread Samuel's letters instead. She remembered his hands, gentle, clever, warm. Not like Emmett's hands. Emmett's were made for chopping wood and ending lives. But he brought her water. He sewed a tear in her sleeve without her asking. One morning, he left a strip of smoked venison on her blanket. No note. She ate it anyway. There was a night, wind howling, snow thick in the air, when Emmett didn't return. The fire burned low. The shadows crept close. Clara sat with her back to the wagon, a rusted rifle in her lap and dread gnawing her gut. Then came the sound, boots in the snow. Heavy. Steady. Emmett emerged from the dark, dragging a full elk carcass on a sled. Blood smeared his coat. A fresh wound glistened on his temple. He collapsed by the fire, tossed her the rifle. "Next time," he said, "shoot if you hear branches snap. Might not be me." And that was all. Still, something shifted. Clara watched him more closely. Not with affection. Not yet. But with interest. The way he cut meat, fast, efficient. The way he never let his horse drink before her canteen was full. The way he stood, always, on the side facing the woods. One evening, as they camped near a ravine, she noticed the way he stared into the flames, jaw tight, eyes far away. And she realized, he carried ghosts too. She whispered, "Was it your wife?" He didn't look up. Just nodded. Clara didn't press him. She didn't need to. That night, she read Samuel's last letter again. But this time, she didn't cry. She folded it carefully and slid it back beneath the Bible. When Emmett handed her a fresh blanket without a word, she took it. For the first time since the coffin, she whispered, "Thank you." He grunted. And that was the end of it. But the silence between them was different now. Not empty. Waiting. The canyon was a slit in the earth, narrow, steep, and stinking of dead leaves and old water. The wagon train had no choice but to go through. The higher passes were already choked with snow, and the mules refused to move west without a fight. Clara walked beside Emmett's wagon, her fingers stiff on the reins of their pack horse. The silence between them had grown quieter still, worn smooth by days of shared fire and unspoken understanding. She no longer flinched when his shadow crossed hers. She didn't need to. The fear that had once carved her chest raw had settled into something heavier, but steadier, like cold iron. The canyon pressed in tighter. Shadows moved like oil across the stone walls. Birds stopped calling. Then came the first sound. A whistle, too sharp, too clean. Not wind. Not natural. Emmett's voice was low and fast. Down. Before Clara could obey, the world shattered. Gunshots cracked from both sides of the canyon. Screams erupted behind them. A wagon wheel burst into splinters. Oxen reared, bellowing, as settlers scattered like kicked ants. Clara ducked beneath the wagon, her heart a jackhammer in her ribs. Dust filled her mouth. She reached for the rifle Emmett had taught her to load but never fire. Emmett was already moving, hat gone, coat flared like wings as he sprinted toward the ridgeline, shotgun roaring with each step. A man appeared above, rifle aimed, but Emmett didn't slow. He threw his hatchet, and the man vanished in a tangle of limbs and dirt. Still they came, bandits in torn Confederate coats, faces masked, firing indiscriminately. Clara saw a girl pulled from a wagon, a scream strangled midair. Saw blood on snow. And then she saw him. A figure moved along the canyon's upper edge, bare-chested beneath a buffalo hide cloak, wore paint dark across his face, hair braided and trailing behind him like black smoke. He raised a rifle longer than he was tall and fired once, clean, precise. A bandit's head snapped back like a puppet. Another shot. Another fall. He moved like a whisper, then vanished into the trees. Clara barely breathed. Within minutes, the bandits scattered. Those who could run, ran. The rest lay broken among the rocks. Silence returned. Emmett limped back to her, blood running from a graze along his ribs. He nodded once, as if to say, "It's done," then turned toward the wounded. That night, the train buried 3 men and a boy. The fire was small, the prayers shorter. Clara sat close to Emmett for warmth. He didn't speak. He never did, not after fights. But he watched the darkness, jaw clenched. Waiting. She was the one who said it. "There was another man," she murmured. "On the ridge. He saved us." Emmett didn't blink. Kaetan. That was all. Later, she saw him again. Kaetan stepped into camp as though he'd grown from the forest itself, quiet, steady, eyes sharp with ancient grief. He carried a bundle of herbs, which he laid beside Clara without speaking. She flinched when their fingers brushed, but he made no move to linger. Only nodded once to Emmett, then turned to go. You know him, she asked when he was gone. Emmett chewed the inside of his cheek. Owe him a life. Yours? He didn't answer. The days grew colder. Snow fell heavy, trapping them in valleys they didn't know. Trees creaked under frost. Mules died standing. Kaetan came and went like a spirit, never announcing himself, never asking for food. He brought smoked fish, dried roots, strange berries that numbed the tongue but warmed the chest. He watched the trees like they spoke to him. He pointed out frostbite on a child's toes before anyone else saw it. Clara began to understand him not with words, but moments. A glance. A gesture. A faint nod when she wrapped a baby in spare wool. He offered her no smiles. Only presence. One morning, Clara found herself watching him sharpen a blade beside the fire. His hands were quick and calloused. His eyes unreadable. She asked, "Why do you help us?" He paused, ran the stone one last time along the edge. "Storm's coming. Can't outrun it alone." Then he left. Clara thought of Samuel. His face came softer now, like something she dreamed once, before the ground turned to ice. She still read his letters at night. But they felt thinner. Less warm. More like echoes. She had to remind herself of the sound of his laugh. The curve of his mouth. But Kaetan was flesh. He bled. He limped. He stared at her hands when he thought she wasn't looking, as if puzzled she'd made it this far. She wondered what he'd seen to make silence his only language. Later, she tried to ask Emmett. Did he lose someone? Emmett didn't look up from the stew pot. We all did. Her voice cracked. I don't want to feel empty forever. His stirring slowed. You won't, he said. You'll feel hard. Then you'll feel nothing. Then one day, something'll hurt again. That's how you'll know you're alive. She stared at the fire a long time after that. One evening, as wind battered the wagons and snow hissed across the stones, Clara stepped out of camp to find air, space, silence. She ended up at the river, half-frozen and cruel. Kaetan stood there already. She meant to leave. But he raised a hand, gentle, not commanding, and pointed to the sky. Aurora danced above them. Ribbons of green and violet, silent and endless. She gasped. Kaetan didn't speak. He only knelt, picked up a small stone, and placed it in her hand. Sky stone, he said. Fallen light. Clara didn't understand. Not the stone. Not him. Not even herself. But she kept it. The next morning, her cough returned. Worse than before. Kaetan brought more herbs. Steeped them in boiling snow. Sat beside her as she drank, face unreadable. He didn't touch her. But when she shivered, he handed her his cloak. Why? She asked. Because you wake, he said. Others don't. She blinked. You think I'm strong. I think you're not dead. Later that night, wrapped in fur, Clara felt Emmett stir beside the fire. He looked toward Kaetan's fading silhouette and said nothing. Then he glanced at her, slow and deliberate. You still think of that soldier? She didn't lie. Yes. Good man? I think so. Emmett nodded, eyes far away. I was, once. The sentence landed heavy. She couldn't tell if it was confession or warning. The fire cracked. The quiet grew thick again. Clara watched the embers, Kaetan's cloak heavy on her shoulders, Emmett's silence beside her. Her hands no longer trembled when she read Samuel's words. And when she dreamed that night, it was not of Samuel's face or Emmett's hands, but of a sky full of fallen light and a man who spoke only in storms. The road ahead was buried in snow, but something had changed. The fear hadn't left, it had evolved. Become something sharp and clear. She wasn't sure who she was walking toward anymore. But she was certain, she was not walking alone. The first body was found half buried in the snow, face down, hands bound with rope that hadn't frayed from weather, only torn by struggle. His rifle lay untouched beside him, frozen fingers inches away. Whoever killed him didn't take it. Clara stared down at the corpse and knew. This wasn't a robbery. This was a message. Kaetan crouched near the body, running 2 fingers along the torn sleeve. He said nothing, but Clara saw the tension in his jaw. Scouts? Emmett asked behind her, voice low. Kaetan nodded. War paint. Not mine. Clara's stomach tightened. The wagon train was still 3 days from the trading post at Fort Laramore. Supplies were low. The women were exhausted. The oxen had begun to cough. They were being hunted. That night, they circled the wagons tighter than ever before. Fires burned low, half for warmth, half to keep what lingered in the dark away. Children cried in muffled arms. Men kept rifles close. Emmett sat beside Clara, sharpening his hatchet with methodical care. She said, "Why now?" "They've been watching," he answered. "Waiting. This place, it's where men vanish." Kaetan stood near the edge of camp, a silhouette against the firelight. Clara watched him press his palm to a tree's bark, head tilted, as if listening to something deep beneath the roots. Then, without turning, he said, "They're testing. Picking us apart." The next day, it began. A wagon axle cracked just before dawn. When Emmett went to check, he found the bolts had been pulled clean, not broken. Deliberate. Tracks circled their camp, barefoot, wide-set, dozens of them. Whoever they were, they moved through snow like ghosts. By the second night, someone slashed the grain sacks. The mules panicked. A boy vanished, taken while fetching water. They found his scarf 30 yards away, soaked in blood. Panic crept in like rot. Kaetan called them the Hollow Men. Not tribe. Not soldier. Something older. Half mad from the war. Men who'd fled into the hills with guns and grief and carved their own laws from stone and ash. They think pain is proof of strength, Kaetan said. They wear masks. Cut off names. Eat what they kill. They'll come for us? Clara asked. Kaetan's eyes were like flint. They already have. It was Emmett who made the call. They'd leave the wagons. Travel light. No fire, no noise. Just what they could carry. We go at dusk, he said. We take the narrow pass. Fast. No stops. Clara packed quickly, wrapping Samuel's letters in a wool scarf, pressing them deep into the bottom of her satchel. She no longer read them every night. But she wasn't ready to let them go. Emmett handed her a revolver. It felt heavier than it looked. She looked up at him. "You think I'll need it?" His eyes didn't blink. "I think you already do." The journey into the pass was a whisper of misery. Snow up to the knees. Ice hanging like knives from the branches above. Children wept silently. Women staggered. Clara lost feeling in her toes after the second mile. Kaetan led from the front, eyes scanning the cliffs, never resting. Emmett took the rear. Hat pulled low. Rifle never lowered. Clara walked between them, fingers on the trigger, trying not to think of what might move beneath the trees. They made it halfway through before the first arrow flew. It struck a man just behind Clara, through the throat, clean and fast. He fell without a word. Behind them, shadows erupted. Chaos. Screams. Gunfire. Snow exploding beneath boots. Clara turned and saw Emmett vanish into the fray, rifle up. Then she saw Kaetan tackle a masked figure with an axe, both of them crashing into the white. She ran. Not away. Forward. Toward the end of the pass. Children cried ahead. One had fallen. Clara grabbed the girl, hoisting her over her shoulder, heart pounding. A figure appeared, tall, blood-slicked, face covered in leather and bone. He raised a blade. Clara fired. The shot rang through the gorge, tearing the mask in half. The man dropped. The girl in her arms screamed, and Clara didn't stop moving. She made it to the ridge. Behind her, others stumbled out, bloodied, breathless. Kaetan emerged next, dragging Emmett, wounded but alive. His arm bled badly. They didn't stop. They moved until the moon gave way to morning. When the sun rose, they were 27. They'd started as 41. The ridge dropped into a long slope, and there, across the white valley, stood Fort Larimore, stone walls, smoke curling from chimneys. Safety. Shelter. Clara wanted to run to it. But Kaetan stopped her. "We can't," he said. "Why?" He pointed back. Smoke rose from the woods behind them, black, fast. "They're chasing. They won't stop at the walls." Emmett staggered upright. His face was pale, blood crusting at his temple. "We draw them off," he said. "Take a few, make it loud. The rest go on." "No," Clara said. "No more dying." Emmett looked at her. Not angry. Not gentle. "Someone has to." Kaetan met her eyes next. "I go," he said. "They fear what they don't understand." Clara stepped forward. "Then so do I." "You won't make it," Emmett growled. "You said I was under your name. Not your leash." He stared at her a long moment. Then he took her hand. Placed the old, twisted ring into her palm. "Keep it," he said. "If you want to." She closed her fingers around it. Kaetan led the charge. Emmett limped behind, rifle braced across his chest. Clara moved like a ghost through the trees, rifle in hand, heart numb. They found a ridge near the river. Set snares. Built false fires. Laid traps. The Hollow Men came fast, drawn by blood. The battle was short. Brutal. Kaetan fought like a wolf, silent, merciless. Emmett covered him, one hand pressed to his side, eyes narrowed with pain. Clara stayed in the tree line. Firing. Reloading. Breathing. Then silence. Only three stood. Kaetan, panting, bloodied but alive. Clara, frozen but standing. Emmett, kneeling. Holding his side. She ran to him. He smiled, crooked and tired. "You're not empty," he said. "Not anymore." Then he slumped. Clara screamed. Pressed her hands to his wound. Kaetan pulled her back gently. There's no more road for him, he said. Clara fell to her knees, snow soaking her dress, wind howling above. Later, she stood over Emmett's grave. Simple. Stones piled. No cross. She wore his coat. Kaetan waited nearby, silent as ever. They did not speak of the past. There was too much of it. But when she turned toward the fort, she paused. Come with me, she said. Kaetan looked at her, long and quiet. Then nodded once. Clara didn't look back. The fort loomed ahead. Samuel was likely dead. Or gone. Or worse. But she was alive. She had blood on her hands. A rifle at her side. A stone in her pocket that once fell from the sky. She had buried the man who married her without love, and mourned him like someone who mattered. She walked now beside a man of few words, and many truths. The road ahead would be dust. And fire. And memory. But it would be hers. And she would walk it unafraid.